Good evening. My name is Gavin Bowman, and today I will be providing you with a crisis case study of the Pan Pharmaceuticals recall that unfolded in April 2003. I will provide an overview of the crisis that unfolded, tying in key events which will be analysed while focusing on how the organisation responded and the reputational effects this crisis had. There are also several theories that I will draw upon within the presentation. McLean and Power's statement on a corporate crisis is pertinent to the Pan Pharmaceuticals crisis that unfolded. They state that a corporate crisis is an event, sudden or developing, that without effective intervention both internally and externally would result in the organisation imploding. In 2003, Pan was Australia's largest contract manufacturer of complementary medicines and also manufactured a range of over-the-counter medications. Pan was a corporate giant, publicly listed on the Australian Securities Exchange as a $300 million company and manufactured thousands of products in Australia and exported them to 62 countries. In mid-January 2003, the Therapeutic Goods Administration led an investigation into Pan's manufacturing practices when it was reported that 87 Australian consumers suffered adverse reactions such as hallucinations and blurred vision, with 19 people being hospitalised after consuming the Travelcalm travel sickness medication. The TGA issued a recall of Travelcalm with the assistance of the vendors, key pharmaceuticals, and carried out audits on the Pan manufacturing processes. The position in which Pan took in working with their regulatory stakeholders began to come to light during the initial audit of the manufacturing facility. Pan representatives were uncooperative during an unannounced visit on the 30th of January 2003, blocking the TGA auditors' access to electronic documents and records. This uncooperativeness resulted in the TGA auditors returning on 13th of February under a search warrant with the assistance of the Australian Federal Police, which resulted in the identification of widespread and serious quality control deficiencies and systematic and deliberate manipulation of data. The findings by the TGA raised the question of how closely was Pan's board scrutinising the company operations. The issues identified were internal and widespread, having developed over a significant amount of time. The Pan operations appeared to not have any internal procedures in place to signal or identify the red flags that a smouldering crisis was developing. By not assisting the TGA audit or identifying that there were significant issues within the operations, they're effectively ignoring issues that were causing a crisis. The company should have implemented a crisis management plan as soon as the TGA identified their findings. By executing prompt intervention by the board, they could have sufficiently removed or prevented a range of the issues, effectively eliminating or controlling the smouldering crisis that was unfolding. On April 24, 2003, the TGA organised a meeting with the Pan's board of directors. An article was released by Needham and Sexton 2003 that reported that during this meeting, it was noted that the Pan board were advised of the Travelcalm issues, but was not advised by Pan's CEO that the audits had identified serious and widespread issues. This internal lack of communication led to widespread confusion and a surprise factor for the board, eliminating their options when taking action to address the matters. In the case of Pan, there was a real gap that existed between the organisation's performance and the way it was behaving. Their key stakeholders held legitimate expectations on the company that were not being met. For example, shareholders legally require continuous disclosure of material events. The suppliers expect that the products they are receiving comply with standards and that the supporting documentation was legitimate. The customers expect that they were receiving quality and authentic products, and the TGA that the company was not deliberately manipulating quality test data and that they were striving to comply with the regulatory requirements to continue production. These examples point to the fact that Pan operations were not in line with those expectations that were held by the company's stakeholders, thus forming an expectation gap. The TGA report was finalised on April 28th, and an order suspending Pan's manufacturing licence for 6 months was issued that day. Pan's chief executive and the founder pleaded ignorance to the extreme nature of the crisis that was unfolding, and a lack of effective communication exploded into a full-blown crisis when on April 29, the TGA reported to the Australian consumer media that it was issuing a blanket warning for consumers to stop taking Pan products, which was ahead of any announcement Pan could provide to its stakeholders. This resulted in the biggest medical product recall in Australia's history, where 1,506 Pan products were recalled. Approximately 1,650 of its export-only medicines were removed from the register of therapeutic goods, on top of the 6-month manufacturing ban. The impact of the recall and the associated negative publicity was felt across the entire complementary medicines industry. This was due to the unique nature of Pan's business model, where they contract manufactured thousands of products for other companies who would market the products under their own brands. It was evident at this point in time that a product crisis had developed, where products were directly affected by deliberate product and quality record tampering and accidental contamination. Pan's product crisis led to a complete recall of the company's products and resulted in boycotts within the complementary medicines industry and liability litigation for the company and its founders. Pan representatives, particularly its chief executive Jim Salim, illustrated a haphazard nature and scarcity of the information he was providing, which allowed other experts and agencies the opportunity to distribute information that supported their own agendas. For example, numerous reports came out regarding the untrustworthy nature of the Pan company and its chief executive, which added to the anger. This resulted in reputational fallout for Pan, as the situation turned into a public relations fiasco and left stakeholders with confusing and incomplete information to handle the PR disaster. On September 23, the company went into liquidation, which effectively submitted the company and its reputation to the crisis that unfolded. The Pan recall was a poorly handled crisis that left a trail of devastation, resulting in multiple legal actions, created industry turmoil, lost consumer confidence in the category of medicines, and resulted in delisting of a $300 million company. It was identified that the response by Pan had a lack of crisis management strategies. For example, they did not identify or make available a company spokesperson, employees and other stakeholders were not kept informed, and the company statements were inadequate and did not express remorse for the situation. Pan should have immediately taken a few specific steps for post-crisis management, such as regular press conferences and media releases detailing Pan's plans to combat the problems, expressing remorse and concern for the welfare of individual consumers and the company's relevant stakeholders, establishing campaigns to counter the damaging publicity, and addressing stakeholders' issues. If Pan took these steps, the repercussions might have been less fatal, and they could have potentially begun to repair a destroyed brand image. In conclusion, the key lesson from this crisis case study on Pan Pharmaceuticals was the illustration of the importance of organisations to develop a thorough crisis management plan that would include preparedness and prevention management strategies. If issues arise, such as the smouldering crisis that was demonstrated, leaders must not ignore the early warning signs or show denial that a crisis was happening. This will allow the company sufficient time to implement thorough incident management procedures and then post-crisis management effectively, allowing the company to come out of the crisis and continue operation. Thank you for listening.